Hi, and welcome to Brain Boogerz. I'm MJ, your host, and I'm so excited you're here. Let me tell you what this podcast is all about. Sometimes our minds get messy, full of thoughts and emotions that tend to perpetuate habits that hold us back. Kind of like when your nose gets clogged and it's hard to breathe. And instead of blowing your nose, you continue to sniffle. Over time, that mucus hardens, and what was once an unnoticed accumulation is now hardened and needs to get out. Finally, when you blow or maybe even pick your nose to remove the irritant, is when you find relief. That's where the name Brain Boogers comes from. Those thoughts, dreams, aspirations, life lessons, passing words, or deep contemplations that seem to show up without consequence while imparting a moment of cognitive exercise. And you think about thinking. This podcast is about clearing out that mental clutter so that you can move forward and feel better no matter what has transpired. If you care about your personal growth, your mental health, and learning how you can be happier, this is the place for you. Hope what you hear sparks action toward better grace and flow. And while I don't promise or guarantee that what you hear will heal your wounds, I hope you're willing to join this journey of 1,000 miles with our first step, and remembering that many things take time. In today's episode, I'll share a little bit about myself, why I started this podcast, and why taking care of your mental health is a cornerstone for progress and motion. Let's get started. As a child of the 80s, I was taught about the great innovators of history. I recall a teacher highlighting Benjamin Franklin as a Renaissance man for the diverse work he did. I wanted that for my life. So my current activities range from finance and operations to personal trainer, bodybuilding coach, fine art model, author, and now podcaster. And at the heart of it all, I love helping people grow. Whether it's through fitness, budgeting, arts and creativity, systems development, or mental health, I'm all about moving forward. But let me be real with you. It hasn't always been easy. Like many of you, I've had my own struggles with mental health. Started when I was approaching my 40s, and one of our favorite newspapers called the group of individuals who were born in 1981 geriatric millennials. That triggered a whole bunch of thoughts and questions on what it means to be called geriatric, and how will my midlife crisis play out if I have one or many? What does the world expect of us based on this individual's opinion? And as you're heading into this new decade, this fifth decade, what does life look like for you moving forward? Around the same time, new challenges presented themselves as I began to hang up bachelorhood. My preconceptions on emotional intelligence, sexual expectations, and the effort to hold on to the old and build something new was creating fractures in my foundation. Because I didn't want my next 40 years to be the same as the previous, I began taking personal inventory of my traits, frame of reference, relationships of all kinds, hopes, and aspirations carried until that point. And I realized there was much I didn't know, for I had been acting confidently with a shallow level of awareness and personal education. I didn't want to keep doing the same thing. As I looked around to see my friends in the same annual dance with very little resolution, I didn't want that for me, and I sought to learn what I didn't know. I addressed lingering thoughts my brain captured from years prior that at first seemed like a slight, but with maturity began to reframe the questions toward my improvement. One of those lingering thoughts was when, in my 20s, someone told me I didn't know what I wanted. Wow, what a shocker! A 20 something who thinks they know what they want and doesn't. And I was good with presenting as though I achieved that effort. And as 40 approached, and I read my past experiences, that this person's words bubbled up and led me to start asking myself, who am I and what do I want? And wondering why my efforts toward a stable relationship was at best failures, at worst situations I should never have allowed myself to entertain. A conversation with my mentor encouraged me to think about what I was attracting to myself. After all, I was getting consistent results, so there was something I was practicing that I hadn't paid attention to. And I wanted to know for me, what would the next 40 years look like, with an expressed effort to make them different than the previous 40 years. After a failed situationship, where I should have taken the individual's word in the beginning instead of thinking, hook up first, love later, and experiencing a mix of support for seeking counseling, as well as wondering if I was becoming unstable when they'd gaslight me, that I was shaken enough to seek therapy. After a few sessions of clarification, validation, and education, I started down a wonderful path after they suggested a book, Consilience, which led me to think about how everything in my life, from my perspective, came to be, is perpetuated, and the gaps in learning that needed to be addressed. And in realizing the gap of mature information exchange, I also started reading on relationship management and learned that to have a great relationship with others, one needs to learn themselves and how they fit in their community and the world. Some may be saying, duh, while others are saying, oh. And I got books on what it means to be in a relationship and what it means to interact with an individual in whatever capacity they are in. My increasing desire to learn how to be a more connected and engaged partner led me to learn there were things about myself that I really did not know. And this was coming into my 40s. And I didn't want to be one of those individuals who, if you are a fool at 40, you're considered a fool forever. The idea being that you're not going to make any efforts toward building and growing and improving after 40. Getting into a rut, stuck in a self-fulfilling prophecy of things not working and constant failures. So as I got these books, I learned much about what influences and perpetuates my attitude, my lifestyle, my attachments, my interactions with my family and friends, my desires, my hopes, and dreams. When an author suggested a book or another writer, I added them to my library and settled in, reading more and more books about what it means to be a human, something that I thought I knew well enough, and learning there was much more. And in the midst of that, because I was often journaling to myself for 20 years as I got into my 40s, I created a list of lessons and found that when I would share these nuggets with other individuals, they found that it was enlightening and inspiring to them and gave them something deeper to consider. And they would say, hey, you have a frame of thought that other people want to hear. You have something that maybe someone is going to say, wow, or yeah, that's actually a good concept. That's a good thing. And thus the creation of Brain Boogerz. And so the effort here is to share what I've learned about myself. Things that, while I have college education, I wasn't degreed for understanding myself, my drivers, motivations, heuristics, and goals. Things I wouldn't learn until I took the time and effort to stop, bad practices, understand their sources, and determining next steps of advancement. And in the midst of this learning and the years of hard skills training, I realized I didn't fully embrace the soft skills that I was taught in high school. You know, we often hear people say, give yourself grace. That's a soft skill that most hard skills individuals aren't taught. Instead, we're encouraged to beat ourselves down until we find the solution. And look, I'm all for the struggle when you know what the nature of the struggle is. Else, you'll be stuck in struggling, unable to determine how to break free, learn, and progress. And I found that as I learned some of the frameworks in philosophy and psychology, and realizing what role I play in society, I began to understand the role some others expected me to play, and how that conflicted with my life's efforts. That, and I needed a rounding of intelligences, emotional, technical, and practical, to start with charity at home with myself, and then that love, affection, energy shared with others. And that's when I was like, wow, now this makes a lot more sense to me. Things are becoming a lot clearer. And in the midst of those times, there were times I felt stuck and overwhelmed and often unsure of what to do next, even in the midst of this learning. But those tough times taught me some of the most important lessons of my life, and I want to share those lessons with you here. Now let's talk about why mental health matters so much. Your mental health affects everything: how you feel about yourself, how you connect with others, how you perform at work, and definitely your physical health. But here's the problem we often ignore. Why? Why don't we focus on physical and mental health as much as we focus on spiritual health or financial health? Why do we do so well to give others attention and refuse to be self centered and selfish and focus on putting on that mask first before helping others? For me, it was because I thought I had to be strong all the time. No tears, no emotions, anger tamped, and laughter muted. I thought asking for help meant I was weak. But you know what I learned? Real strength comes from being honest with yourself and taking steps to care for your mind and your heart. Being vulnerable, allowing yourself to be authentic. That was often a challenge for me. The authenticity I hid behind walls and shells that I created for myself so that I didn't need to show the soft and gooey parts of me. The seemingly vulnerable parts. The parts that I now listen to and give great attention, with many of my friends saying, wow, I've not heard you laugh before, or I've never seen you cry, or I've never heard you be so passionate about something. And I realize that oftentimes we live according to what we think we know and aim to project. Psychologists talk about our three lives: the life you are actually living, the life that you project to others, and the life from others' perspectives. I learned my authenticity mattered more than putting on a show. And with this, I would be consistent, vulnerable, and insightful, i.e., understanding me better. The road to self discovery wasn't without questions from individuals in my orbit, with one stating, "You're reading all these books. For what?" I happily and confidently replied that I read them because I'm on a journey of self, and the better I understand me, the better I understand the world. I'm not reading to teach in university, but instead to start the experiments of social improvement and introspection, and in that, bring change to others by example. At the heart of it all, I enjoy teaching or imparting a question to spark others' thoughts. all for our betterment. I think one of the best ways to improve society is through sharing. And we should share our experiences and what we've learned and how we get through life. And hopefully push that information down through the younger generations so that the next generations can pick up on it quicker and avoid many of the things that we didn't need to endure or wasn't necessary. Had I learned this earlier, I may have had better outcomes. So each one teach one. And to teach others, I needed to overcome my own walls and shells of protection. And in so doing, help others. See, the shell I erected was for protection, but against a foe of my own making. And I think that others do the same. Slowly, or never realizing the negative impact that this construction has on us. One material I constructed my shell with was time. I made every effort to reduce downtime, getting to a point where I was overwhelmed, working nonstop, aiming to keep active without completely burning myself out. And as a result, I got tired, cranky, and I felt like I was failing, even when I was winning. It wasn't until I made mental health a priority and said, hold up, I need to look at this. I need to see what's going on and get through these generational curses, that I'd find solutions, relief, and restoration, like going to therapy, meditating, and learning to say no. That's when I started to feel better. And that's what I want for you. I want this podcast to be a space where we can talk openly about mental health, learn together, and take small steps to build the life we want. Here's something simple you can do today. 1. Take 5 minutes to check in with yourself. Ask, how am I really feeling right now? Why am I feeling this way? Is this feeling tied to something unresolved in my childhood if it feels negative? And if it feels positive, how can I continue this going? What mantra can I give myself? Is this something that I need to reconcile if negative? For example, in how long ago you endured an adverse experience at the center of your reactions and what they may be. And 2, write down one small thing you can do this week to feel better. Maybe it's going for a walk, or calling a friend you haven't talked to in a while, or just taking a moment to breathe when things feel hard. Remember, small steps can lead to big changes. As a friend of mine says, little makes much. Before we wrap up, I just want to say thank you for being here. Starting this podcast has been a dream of mine, and I'm so glad you're here on this journey with me. Here's what you can expect moving forward. We'll talk about topics like resilience, attachment styles, and overcoming challenges. I'll share personal stories, tips, and maybe even bring on some amazing guests who've inspired me. If you like this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. It helps more people find the show and join our community. Next week, we'll talk about something amazing, something really important, your ocean, and how we can manage being in a salty situation and or deal with salty outcomes by diving into our basic pH. These are 2 big ideas that can help you understand yourself better. You won't want to miss it. Take care of yourself this week, and remember, you're not alone. Forward motion is always possible. I'll see you next time when we dig in on Brain Boogerz.